C3, Connecting, Coaches, Cognition, Coaching with Courtney and Christensen. As a busy coach, you spend all day refueling, revamping, and reflecting with educators. Now is the time to stop and recharge your batteries with some much-needed coaching for the coach.
Welcome back to another episode of C3. I'm Courtney Groskin, and I'm here with
Violet Christensen.
Violet. We're wrapping up another season. It's hard to believe that season 6 is coming to a close. I thought we'd have a bit of a reflecting conversation today. So I'm going to ask you, if we were to watch a highlight reel of your school year, what would be a moment that you'd want to make sure made like the opening credits and was included in this reel?
Number one, great coaching question, and then I'll address it, but that's amazing. Thank you for switching it up. And number two, if I had to think about my highlight reel, and I have been through a lot of transitions, and thank you, Courtney, for always coaching me through all of those moments, no matter how hard or impactful those might have been on your world. But my highlight reel would obviously be my girls and their achievements this year, but also like just getting back with the heart of small children. And sometimes we need to bounce between different roles to get back to our core in education. And I think for this year, like that would be my highlight reel of like, I could name 100. I could name every kid, all these instances, whatever. But that reconnection with your purpose sometimes is the biggest highlight reel you can have, right? Like kids showing up. So for me, both my own 2 lovely daughters and just all the kids of my school and my class, like, and all the teachers who I've had some small, tiny thumbprint on in whatever way to like enhance what we're doing at my site, in my district, in our world is like, that's the best highlight ever. And I feel like I spent last night, Courtney, making a flag football reel. And I just feel like every teacher deserves that. Like I wish I could show up in every teacher's literal classroom and make video highlight reels, because I think we'd all feel more empowered going into August, like looking back at our game tape. Like we don't always get that. And I think sometimes we need that as coaches, as administrators, and as educators as a whole, whether you're a specialist, classified, custodial, clerical, it doesn't matter. Like I just think everyone in education deserves like a 1-up of like, if you were in Mario Kart, you get a 1-up right now. Like you're amazing. Like, so we all need a little, like a highlight reel. So thank you for that question. That's remarkable. Like Courtney, what's coming up in your world? What is your highlight? Like what do you want to bring to the surface today? Tell me more.
Well, I was going to say first that perhaps your student successes are a mirror on your own success. And by watching them finally have it click, you're starting to see the growth inside of yourself.
Absolutely. And just, I think the realization of being really happy in that space and seeing the growth in them just makes you honor the effort. And I think that's what teachers need to hear, and coaches and administrators and all the people we speak about all the time, right?
So if you're listening, give yourself a pat on the back.
Yes.
You deserve it.
In every way, whether you're emptying a trash can or you're filling out IEPs or you're sitting there trying to make sure CMAS is put in correctly or whatever it is, like y'all are doing a great job. And I think we got to honor ourselves and what we do more, because it doesn't always happen in our profession. And we just have to like continue to celebrate, right? Like,
yeah, why do we wait till the end of the year to take a breath to reflect? It should be happening throughout your year. And that's why coaching is so important, and meeting with a coach.
It's so important. And like, I just think that's what teachers need from their coaches is like more celebration. And that's so remarkable that they can bring that to the forefront. And then they get to bring it to their students, and that infiltrates the entire system. And that's just, the more sunshine we can spread, the better we are. We got to be lighthouses. But like, Courtney, what is on your highlight reel? I want to hear more about like what you would say about this year, because I know we have a big guest. She's going to tell us tons of stuff, but I want to hear what's going on with you.
Well, my reel would be a mishmash for sure. I think really just celebrating the balance between my big initiatives. I was part of the AI lead team, which is the third 3-person team that's kind of led the district's AI initiative, working with 3 schools and then becoming a cognitive coach trainer. Agency trainer has been a big part of my year. And I would like to think that if you talk to one person from each group, they would all feel they 100% of the time have my attention. And that's something I've strived really hard to do this year, is that when I'm in an AI meeting, I'm focused on AI. And when I'm at cog coach training, I'm focused on cog coaching. And, when I'm at my schools, I'm present with my educators there, and that I try not to let them cross over too much unless it's appropriate to, but really just honoring the people that are in front of me and trying to give them my all and, be that coach, that listener, and mirror back, hopefully, what people need in that moment.
I am absolutely sure that every one of your constituents, if that's the correct word, your coachees, however you would like to say that, your
Hopefully they're not
educators.
voting for me.
I mean, no, was that the wrong word? Probably my verbiage today. It's been a long day, but you know what? They all, I'm sure, feel gracious and appreciative of your investment and dedication to them. And every educator that is heard every day is a better educator tomorrow. So thank you for doing that. And you have taken on so much for coaching and for your district and also just for education in general. So thank you for investing in that and taking the time, because that's hard.
It's all good work.
It sure is. Sheri, we are so excited to have you back on C3. I just caught myself in us just catching up, calling you my friend, and it's lovely to have you back here on C3. And it does feel like having a friend back to the podcast. And we just are so excited to hear about all of your new works and all of your new thoughts you're willing to share with our listeners. And just thank you for being here.
Well, I love it. And thank you for having me. And I truly mean that. And definitely you should be calling me a friend. This is our 3rd podcast together. And I follow you on social media and love to see your work and your podcast as well.
Well, you're too sweet. I'm always very humbled. I'm like, oh, Sheri St. Clair just liked something. Oh my gosh. But for all of our listeners who maybe haven't been through those other episodes with us or haven't followed you work before, which would be very hard, and if they're in the instructional coaching realm, to not have heard of you or learned about all of your expertise. But can you just catch us up a little bit about how you've gotten here and where you are today and what you're passionate about in this moment? And we're just excited to have you back.
Sure. Yes. I don't know how far you want me to go back, but, I have been a teacher, high school administrator. I've worked for the State Department in Kentucky as a middle and high school consultant. And then at that time, my national work grew. And at this point, I'm honored to say that I've been able to work with schools all across the country and beyond, and just love, love, love what I do. Everything that I do is based on instructional improvement, instructional leadership. And so that's where I have spent the focus of my career and feel passionate about it. Wrote my first book, Coaching Redefined, or my first solo book, Coaching Redefined, so that instructional leaders, whether you're administrator or an instructional coach, could have a guidebook of how to set it up effectively, and all the components that go into it, from growing yourself to growing your school to thinking about the culture of the school. So that book came just out of a desire to make it work. When I was a school administrator, we did not have funding for an instructional coach, and I was in the position of administrator and thought, well, how do I do this if I'm an administrator? And so that started my journey of researching how it was done, and eventually ended up in Coaching Redefined. And then just recently, well, I say recently, it's been like 3 years in the making, but I thought about what I was getting asked from schools, and it was, Sheri, we know that we should be focusing on instructional improvement, but what does that look like? If we could just have a guide for our teachers or to use with our teachers. And I sat with several schools and had outlined it with them and told them, this is how it looks, and worked with them on developing it. And I would walk away and it would never get pulled together. and it was because it was too much work for a school to do. And so I just thought, this is something that I can do in my role. I can do that. And that was an ambitious goal. But 2 years and into researching and writing, I have published Intentional Instructional Moves. And that book, it just sets up what classroom instruction should look like, effective classroom instruction based on research, and the intentional steps to improve that. And I'm so proud of the feedback that book has been getting. It's just been overwhelmingly positive, and I love it. But I think it is because the feedback is because it is meeting that need that I see in schools. So I work with them.
Yeah, it's hard when schools need to make changes, and your book really serves as a great place to start, and makes it tangible that it seems like it's something that people can accomplish.
Well, thank you. And it is something that people can accomplish. And when I wrote Coaching Redefined, my audience was, instructional coaches or administrators. And when I wrote Intentional Instructional Moves, I decided to write that to teachers because I feel like it's something that administrators or coaches can use with teachers, but teachers are going to be the one to implement these things. And I'm hoping that coaches will pick it up and use bits and pieces of it with the teachers that they coach. That's what I see my coaches doing, and they're loving it. But ultimately, it's the teacher that's going to implement this, and we need to be speaking their language.
Definitely. And we love to talk about the relationship and rapport with coaching and how important that is. And I know you emphasize the importance of deep and meaningful conversations with teachers. What strategies do you recommend for coaches to help foster trust and also encourage reflective dialogue?
Well, ultimately, I think this is where actions speak louder than words, right? and teachers are watching us, and they're paying attention to what we do, what we say, how we act, all of those things. And so we have to make sure that, number one, we are humble in our position, that we are humble, that we do not come into a situation thinking that we know everything. And we don't. We are all learners. And so I think when we approach our profession that way, people pick up on that. I'm still that learner. Today, I have sat in my office and researched for 8 hours of how to make sure that when I tell people how to set up effective classroom walkthroughs, that I'm getting it correct with the newest research. I'm still learning things. And I think one of the things that coaches can do when they're creating those relationships with teachers is help them understand that they're still learning as well. They don't have all the answers. They don't need to have all the answers. They shouldn't have all the answers, but they should be learning. That's one thing. Number two, ask reflective questions. You two know that I am an advocate for doing a listening tour before you even start coaching. So you learn about the teacher and their needs, and the needs of the school, and the needs of community and students in general. But make sure that as you're working with teachers, that you are constantly asking questions and getting their feedback and getting their thoughts. You're not only listening to what they're saying in their answers, you're listening to how they're responding, you're listening to what they're not saying in their answers, but making sure that you set that up with questions. And then I think we need to make sure that we constantly see the best in people. Try to, that's hard sometimes. On some days are tough as coaches. This is not an easy role. But sometimes we forget that life is hard too, and that teachers have bad days just like every other human on the planet. And we just need to make sure that when we're in those classrooms, that we never stop believing in the teacher's ability to improve and build those relationships. So those are just some of the things that we can do.
that positive presupposition just wrapped in some grace can go a really long way. And I love how you speak to the nuances of coaching that, that listening tour. And I always kind of think of it when I hear about it from you as not just a listening, but also an asking tour, like a question, like deeper questions and hearing more and just trying to get to the root of, what they say and then also what they're not saying when they're not saying it or when they get to saying it, when you give them a little bit more questioning or paraphrasing so that listening tour can just be that pivotal turnaround for a great entryway into great coaching, right? It can just be all those little nuances could be so powerful together.
And I will add this too, is because as you said, we might have new listeners on here that haven't listened to the previous podcast that we've done together. But that listening tour is something that inevitably, when schools try it, when I'm first starting to work with schools and they try it, they will come back and say, this is the best thing we've ever done. It told us more than anything else that we've done. It shapes our coaching in our school because it's just such a respectful approach to how we lead. And, coaching is a leadership role. So if people want more information on that, they can get that on my website, and I'm sure you're going to link that to this. But it is definitely something that can change your trajectory of how the teachers in your school see coaching.
Absolutely. Can you peel back a few more layers for us and just in that nuance and in that entry into coaching, like coaches often navigate this fine line between trying to be supportive and building that rapport and being good partners, but also ensuring that instructional improvement. And we've heard of some of that from you before, but how can coaches effectively balance that encouragement also with holding the accountability?
Okay, so I think this is something that I think if the foundation of coaching is set up correctly in a school, that this part will be minimal that a coach has to face. Now, every coach doesn't get to pick that environment that they walk into in a school, and it's not always perfect, and we should all hope it were. But there's a few things that a coach can do. Number one, get clarity around their role. And on my website, I have a form of questions that a coach should ask their administrator when setting up coaching. And it just lets that coach have a firm understanding of the expectations of their administrator. So they know that they have the go ahead on certain things and then where they need to kind of hold back. And then I think a protocol needs to be in place. And I have an example of that in Coach Redefined and on the website, and I've written about that. But that protocol tells what the coach's role is in instructional improvement, what the administrator's role is, and also what the teacher's role is. Those things need to be foundational elements in a school because that gives that coach the authority to move forward on certain things, and then also gives the teacher authority in certain areas. If they don't agree with the coach, how do they handle that? So those are two pieces. And then a third piece, I think that coaches sometimes forget, and we've kind of alluded to it already, but is to make sure when they are meeting with that teacher that they point out the positive things. Recognize that positive part of the instructional practice. Now, that there's that popular method of sandwiching the positive with the ideas for growth and then ending on a positive. I'm not sure that I'm okay with that I completely agree with that, because usually we just wait for whatever the person says that it needs improvement and then forget the rest of the positive part. And that's just from me being in the field and kind of watching how that flows, and then me being a teacher and receiving feedback as well. But there is a lot of research around how individuals are recognized for their positive work and how that engages them in the work even deeper and actually is connected to retention. So all those things are important for us in education right now. As you know, we don't have extra teachers out there. And so we want to recognize the positive things that teachers doing. Weave them into the conversation. They don't have to go at the beginning and the end, but weave them in an authentic way. And then I think that the other thing that we can do is provide timely and authentic feedback, honest feedback. I think if we do that consistently, people understand where we stand. And if we know our stuff, our research, then teachers will respect that. It is a fine line, but I will tell you, I think that we have to overcome our fears and understand that we're in this role for a purpose. And if we don't speak with honesty and give that feedback to teachers, that they may not hear it. It's not respectful to a teacher to walk into their classroom and leave and say, good job, and then leave that classroom and roll our eyes and say, oh my goodness, that classroom's a mess, or that they need to improve. That's not respectful to a teacher. And I think that they pick up on that. So as we talk with them, we need to be honest and let them know what we see, because we may be the only one to see them. I'll share one little story with you, and I hope we have time for it here. But I was working in a school district. They had hired me to come in to work on instructional improvement. I was having some meetings with teachers, and this one teacher was like, I don't understand why you're here. We're doing just fine. We don't need to make any changes. Our kids are happy. We're doing fine. And I left so frustrated because that school had a graduation rate of less than 50%. And I thought, how can you think that you're fine? You're not. That's not okay. And I mean, it just broke my heart. But I was in that spot of just like, my goodness, what do I do? This teacher's reality is not where it needs to be. And so I had to step back from that and say, okay, why does that teacher not see that this piece? So I circled back in time and had that very honest conversation with that teacher and said, listen, here's where your graduation rate is. And then I went on and explained, how graduation rate was connected to incarceration and voting and volunteers and people on welfare and social services, supported social services after graduation. I mean, it doesn't just impact when they leave our class, it impacts forever. And we had a real honest conversation that led to that teacher completely flipping and accepting coaching in a way that I never thought that they would. But it took somebody just saying, hey, no, it's not okay. That's not fine. But I couldn't expect that teacher to change without understanding some of those pieces. And that was on me. So sometimes it's just having those critical conversations.
And what a beautiful example of not going right into what's not working or could be changed in our classroom and grounding in that third point of data of like, let's look at our graduation rate. Is this really working and serving us?
Right. And it's not easy. It made me I was nervous going into that. But if we are in this role, we have to face some of those critical conversations. And so, that fine line piece there is, that person could have really become angry and said, who are you to tell me this, coming into my school this way? But I had to face that and be okay with whatever happened. And they absolutely flipped and were quite respectful of the work. It doesn't always happen that way, but many times I've found that it does if we just respect those teachers enough to have those honest conversations with them.
Yeah, and I think that's where that respect and rapport come in. If they feel the relationship is genuine, they're going to be more receptive and open to those courageous conversations that you're having.
Absolutely. We know people that we can look back on our past and we know those teachers that believed in us, respected us, loved us, and we know the ones that didn't. And for those that did, we would have done anything in the world that they asked to improve, right? But for those that we thought were just not authentic or didn't like us, it makes it a harder place for us to learn.
You have to build that foundation, whether you're a teacher with your students or whether you're a coach with your coachees. I mean, it's brick by brick, like you're saying, building that rapport and relationship. And it's just very parallel in those two regards, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Earlier, you talked about staying up on research and not having the answers to everything. You're out in the field a lot. What are common mistakes you see instructional coaches make, and how might we avoid some of these mistakes? I'm sure all of us would love to relive our first year of coaching and do it differently.
Me too. Me too. Yes. Well, okay. So one thing that I see quite often, and I'm not sure, I wish I didn't see this one at this point, but is that we don't have goals collaboratively set with our teachers. And we sometimes just go in classrooms to see what we can see or have very vague goals. But goals, if we look at the research, goals actually can bump our productivity from 11 to 25%. So we think about that per classroom. If we just have a clear goal set with that teacher, then that could bump every classroom from 11 to 25%. That just blows my mind that we're leaving that on the table as just to have. So that can't be a goal that the school sets for the whole school. That needs to be a goal that coach and teacher have sat down together and designed collaboratively. So that's one thing. The second thing is that we do not differentiate. Sometimes we are guilty of a one-size-fits-all goal for the whole school or professional learning. But if we are expecting our teachers to differentiate for students, we must model differentiation for our teachers. And we must coach and lead them differently based on their needs, but also provide differentiated professional learning for them. So I see that. And then the third thing I see is I think sometimes we spend too much time in classrooms at a time. If we look at the research, and multiple pieces of research says that our walkthroughs should take between 3 and 10 minutes. Now that sometimes when I'm working with schools blows their mind. They're like, how can I see what I need to see in 3 minutes? Or how can I get what I need for my coaching within 10 minutes? And if we get the goal right, it can happen. If the goal is too broad, then I find that coaches and administrators will spend too long in that classroom. And then that leads to them saying they don't have enough time to get to all the classrooms or classrooms frequently. And then that impacts the growth, that instructional growth. So if we can get in there for less time, but more often, just to see things connected to that goal, not see everything, but things connected to that goal, we will see greater growth in those teachers that we coach.
Absolutely. Being able to harness that and have a pulse all the way around the building at any given time, as opposed to just one corner or one niche is powerful in coaching and for admins, and especially admins who are trying to coach in their own way and support in their own way too, right?
Right. And not just seeing that teacher once a month. You know, if we go and sit the whole class period, which I love to do that. I get lost in time. But if we do that, then we just are giving up the coaching that we can give to another teacher. And we have to stay in control of that time and and be very intentional about what we're looking for in those classrooms, and that feedback is related to that goal, and just make sure our eyes are truly focused on that, so that it also helps with that follow-up meeting to be much shorter if we're not talking about 400 things that we saw in that classroom, things related to that goal.
Exactly. And it truly goes back to the respect you speak about in honoring the teacher, because it shows respect by being in there frequently and seeing their teaching and being able to speak to them about the good things. How can you speak to the good things if you're not seeing them ever? And so just being able to have those nuances and current feedback and data, and also just appreciation. But like, Sheri, tell us, what shifts do you believe instructional coaches need to make? And I heard some of them. We need to have the protocols and those clear roles and goals, but what other instructional, like, what can they do to truly lead that meaningful instructional goals and growth, and just keep the target there and keep the conversations harnessed around that instructional goals growth?
So I think the biggest thing would be the reason why I wrote Intentional Instructional Moves. And that is that we need to slow down and think about the smaller steps that teachers can take to get to that instructional growth. And sometimes we will say, well, let's just work on engagement, and that'll be the end of it. Or we might get to where we say, let's work on cognitive engagement or behavioral engagement or emotional engagement. We might pick one area and then that be it. But we really need to break it down into much smaller steps and think about where that teacher is and then what would benefit the next. Not the end of where we want them to be, but where are they? Those are two totally different places, and we coach differently. If we want to think about where we want them to get to at the end, or where their next step is in that progression of learning, those are two different ways of thinking. And so one of the things that I saw in coaching my coaches, they were taking too big of steps. And then they would meet resistance from teachers because they were too big of steps. The teachers would have difficulty visualizing how they got there. And so that's why I wrote Intentional Instructional Moves. It outlines those big concepts of what makes effective instruction, but then it also takes and it breaks it down to intentional steps. And then there is a companion guide that goes with it, that's a virtual companion guide where with each one of those intentional steps, a coach or a teacher can go to that intentional step and see various strategies and have the correlating handouts that go with each of those strategies, so that there's some choice in which strategy to pick to get to that. But I think one of the flips that we have to make is not to think so big, but to think about those smaller steps. Another piece that I see is coaches will sometimes focus on state assessment scores. And I think that is one element that we need to be paying attention to, but it is not the biggest element. We are in the field of education to help create humans that can go out into the world and be productive citizens. And that means that we need to pay attention to their social emotional growth. We need to be paying attention to what the workforce says or the career skills that students need, and then also the achievement results. And sometimes instructional coaches get fixated on just those state assessment scores. And it's easy to do because it's the data that's right in front of us. But that was never meant to be a ceiling for us. That's just one data point. And so we need to understand how those all fit together in classroom practices. And I think that another piece, and that I talk about this in Coaching Redefined, is that we need to embrace our leadership position and study leadership and marketing and human psychology. Just listen to those podcasts as you are doing your laundry or whatever, but just understand how some of those concepts can be brought into our field. Not many of us have had to dive into the leadership component of this work or the marketing of ideas or vision casting and those things that really can impact our leadership or even the psychology of how humans learn and how they behave so that we don't take our work so personally, but understand that, the things that come with human growth. And if coaches find themselves in those positions, I highly encourage them to really listen to some leadership podcasts, some business podcasts, some things around human growth and human psychology. And it has helped me greatly as I work with people.
Yeah, it's really important for us to have that understanding of what growth looks like and the psychology behind it, because there is so much that goes on where we can't necessarily see it immediately.
And it's not something that's necessary. And we might take one course in it in college unless we just, we're in that field, but we don't get a lot of it. And it is really important.
What advice would you give to a coach or even to a teacher who's working on sustaining this long-term growth within their school?
I think it is really important that we take good notes. We forget where we came from in this role often, and it's important for us to just jot down some notes that we can go back to real quickly and see here's where we were, so that we can see if what we're doing is working or not working, what needs to be adjusted, but just not to forget where we come from, because as this is a journey. There is no end point. Our role is to continuously help those that we serve get better. And in order to do that, we're continuing to push and grow with them. And sometimes we forget that, hey, 3 years ago, my teachers weren't talking to each other, or they weren't asking me for professional learning, or they weren't researching on their own. Those kinds of things. We forget how those pieces impact teachers' learning, but also where we came from. So take good notes. And then the other thing that I encourage coaches to do is to think about their school as a learning organization and how much you are not only seeing the achievement growth of your students, but also seeing the growth of those teachers, and keep that in mind. How is the culture changing to accept continuous growth? Those are two things that I think are important. I was just working with a school here recently, and they had brought me in to set up instructional coaching with their leaders. And when I first worked with that school, they said, teachers just don't want to try anything new. We seem to be just kind of plateauing where we are, and we're comfortable where we are and do good teaching, but we're just not seeing them really ask for professional learning, want to go to professional learning or try new things in their classroom. And we've worked together a while, and just here recently had some reflective time with teachers, and they were telling us all the things that they were trying without any mandates or anything. These are just things that they're trying from our embedded professional learning. And the school leaders and I stepped back and we talked about, isn't that wonderful that is now where we are in this journey? And that's not anything small. That is a huge step that is going to lead to even more professional growth in that school. So, but we forget that, when we started this journey, that wasn't the case if we don't write down those notes.
Being able to capture that journey over time and celebrate for your own coaching journey as well. What a beautiful sentiment to be able to, always focus on that celebration in the long run and be able to hold those in some capsule for your own self.
Right. And what you've done, how you've grown too. That's important. And how you're handling it too. So.
Well, we are just so blessed to end on that note and hear that beautiful story to finish up. And we just want to kind of shift to that rapid fire. And we know you could just Google Sheri St. Clair and we would find you as the first thing up there, Miss Number One. But will you share just your website and the places you like to connect with our listeners so that we can just also let them embrace and learn more and dig into all things you?
Sure. My website is reflecttolearn.com. I'm happy to connect with people there. They can sign up for my newsletter. I have over 10,000 subscribers right now. I'm so happy about that. But I try to put out at least one newsletter a month. You ladies know some months I'm better at that than others with my work, but I try. I try to do one at least once a month so people can connect with me there on Reflect to Learn. You can find me on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. And I will try to be more active on social media. I'm most active on Facebook, but people can definitely connect with me on all three of those platforms. And I would love to connect. I love to connect with readers of my work and with people who listen to things like this to hear their feedback. I really do enjoy hearing from people. So I hope they reach out.
I can say it. I see it on your feed and I'm so excited to hear from this person or being able to post with someone who found you at a conference or at a whatever it may be. So really reach out, my friends, because she really does like to hear from everyone. And since you've been here before, we always want to hear if there's some new spin or a refinement on your definition of coaching. What does it mean to you?
I don't know if it's a new spin, but I definitely see it as a deeper need. And that is that coach is not only the collaborator for content, which you know that I've shared that view for years, but also just that partner for growth and that partner who understands that teachers do not come to school as a blank slate, that they have other things happening in their lives, and that we should be supportive of things outside of the school as well as inside of the school. I just think we're in a different place as a society, and people need the support of other humans. We never know what they're dealing with, and our world is filled with some heavy stuff right now. So for coaching, I think we will be wise to be aware of that and to understand how that impacts a person's ability to think about change in their lives, in their classroom.
Absolutely. And teachers need coaches more than ever, and coaches need coaches, and everyone needs a coach. And we just want to appreciate you as a coach who we get to share and learn from. And just tell us, is there anything that you have not shared with us that you want to put in there as your last thoughts?
This work is immensely important. It's why that I've devoted my professional life to it. It is what research shows has the greatest impact on student learning. It's embedded coaching in schools. So never forget that. It is hard for a reason. It is hard because it is so important and has the ability to have such a huge impact. It is equally rich and rewarding. And you ladies know that, but it is so wonderful when you see a human experience greater success in their classroom because you've been able to walk beside them. And so I know there are good days in coaching and days that we feel defeated, but never let those defeated days outweigh the good days. If you find yourself in that position, then find you a good community of coaches and latch onto them, because we all do need coaches. I have a coach, you know that. And I think it's a way that people help us see things that we need to see within ourselves. And give yourself grace. You're going to fail. I shared with you before we started the podcast that I'd been researching for a blog post that I'm writing, and in my intentional instructional moves, and I think I'll probably this will end up in the blog post too, but Brene Brown shared that failure is something that we should embrace. And that if we are brave enough to try new things often enough, that failure is just going to happen. It's just going to be part of it. So that's not an exact quote, but it's close enough to, I think, for this. But, the fact is we will not always have success as coaches, and that's okay. That means that we're still learning and we're human.
What a beautiful way to tie it up with a bow that, we all go back to, we're all learners and we're all going to do what learners do, is fail and learn and grow and get back up and keep trying and find the best way to navigate the water. So we are just so grateful to have you. And it's just a beautiful sentiment to the end. And thank you so much for giving us your time and energy. And we hope all of our listeners found some amazing thoughts from you that they can pull forward. And I'm guaranteeing that many of them already have your book or will be going out to find it now.
Thank you. Thank you both for the time and the opportunity. Love your work. You know that.
Absolutely. And thank you for your friendship. And we will hopefully hear from you again at some point.
Sounds good. All right.
Sheri had so many wonderful insights to share. She did talk about intentional goal setting and how that can bump our productivity. What goals might you set for yourself or with your teachers? Thanks for listening to another episode of C3. And thank you for listening to Season 6. We'll return in September with a brand new season. Be sure to follow us on social media. C3. Connecting, coaches, cognition. Whose thinking will you mediate today?